physically, they're breathing better, they have more energy, mentally and emotionally, their inner states, they're more peaceful, they've resolved deep emotional pieces, and they feel more connected to the authentic self. And this is across the board. So breath is an amazing tool. It's a tool, but it does so many things.
You're listening to A New Way of Living with Dan Voss, inspiring you to a new life of breathwork, cold therapy, and plant medicine. In this week's episode, my guest is Judith Kravitz. Judith is a breathwork pioneer. Beginning in the late 1970s, she has molded the crest of modern breathwork with love, skill, and intuition, helping hundreds of thousands worldwide. She's the author of the book Breathe Deep, Laugh Loudly, which has been translated into 8 languages. In 1994, she founded the Transformational Breath Foundation and its training programs, and still serves as its executive director. I'm so excited to have Judith on the show today to hear her story and journey of connecting with her breath and how she's helping people all over the world do the same. Judith, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here and reach out to people this way.
Yes, absolutely. And I know you are so well respected in the breathing community, and you have been involved in this space for decades and have made such an impact in the community and for individuals worldwide. So I'm really excited for our conversation today and hear more about how this all came to be and learn more about your work in the breathwork space. So with that being said, can you share a little bit more about why conscious breathing is so important right now? And I often have conversations with people about breathing and breath work, and some people kind of scoff at it almost and say, why do I need to learn about conscious breathing? Like, I know how to breathe. I've been breathing my whole life. But they might not get the conscious aspect to it. So can you share a little bit more about why that's so important in today's world?
Yes, and what you said, I've heard so many times, and decades ago even more, because it was so less into conscious awareness. And more people are becoming aware of the importance of breathing, but also the need for it now on every level. Physically, there's things happening on the planet where we need to be conscious, have a relationship with our breath. Mentally, emotionally, there's so many changes going on. We need a tool to be able to not just manage our emotions, but actually resolve the current ones and be able to go deep inside and access the emotions of the suppressed past. And then, of course, spiritually, we're all being called to go deeper and connect with more of who we are, source energy, and things like that. So breath is paramount right now. And I felt it for a long time, but it feels like finally there's more global recognition and acceptance. So I feel like it's a good time it's a good time to breathe and to be breathing people.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think now more than ever, we need this in our world. And as you had mentioned, there's so many applications to apply conscious breathing, whether that's physical performance, have, just better relationships and conversations, manage your emotions, like you had just mentioned. Just a host of mental health benefits, physical health benefits, de-stressing or managing stress and anxiety better. I mean, the list really goes on. And the more I get into this space about learning about our breath and how we can use it to our benefit, it seems like that list keeps growing and growing in terms of all the different benefits.
So many. To me, it's one of the greatest gifts we have. And it's been so exciting to share it with so many, because people don't realize, they take it for granted, unconscious about it, never really learn to do it well. And so to have that opportunity to give people that has been an incredible gift.
Yeah, what is that transformation like that you see in some of the people you're working with when they come to you and they've never practiced intentional breathing or conscious breathing before? And then maybe weeks go by or months go by and they're using this on a daily basis. And then all of a sudden it's just like a part of who they are. What are some of the things you're seeing with the folks you work with?
Well, when we start a program, because we do personal journeys, a week-long personal journey, and then we have training for facilitators and trainers. But when we go to the personal journey one and our staff introduces themselves, and we usually have a 2-to-1 ratio, a staff person for every 2 people. So we have good sized staffs. And when they introduce themselves and they share, the most common thing they say is transformational breath has changed my life. And that is what we more or less guarantee for people that week, that first week, that their life is going to be transformed on every level. And that's the potential. And we've been given a program or developed a program that takes people through such a deep and incredible transformational process in that week time that at the end, everyone admits, I'm transformed. My life is different. I am different. So, and this is on every level. Physically, they're breathing better. They have more energy. Mentally and emotionally, their inner states, they're more peaceful. They've resolved deep emotional pieces, and they feel more connected to the authentic self. And this is across the board. So breath is an amazing tool. It's a tool, but it does so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I sense a lot of that as I have incorporated intentional breathing on a daily basis. Now I'm in a certification program to become a certified breath coach. And once you start incorporating this on a daily basis, to your point, you're improving the physical aspect, with exercise or even just walking. I notice I have my breath more in tune, and my sleep has been improved. We've listed a lot of the mental health aspects of it in terms of managing stress and anxiety and being more aware of our emotions. And I think that's what I'm getting the most out of intentional breathing practice, is better connected with my emotions. And it's not to say that you're going to eliminate negative emotions out of your life, because we're human, and we still will experience things like anger and fear and sadness. But it's about being aware of those emotions when they arise, and then taking a few moments to tap into your breath and then show up in a little bit different way than maybe we have in the past. So I would love to talk a little bit more about that emotional aspect. What are some things, whether that's in your own life or with your clients, that you see with emotional health?
Okay. Well, I agree with you. It's so amazing to have this incredible tool to more or less weather the feelings, because you're right, we're human, and what would life be without our feelings? So feelings are really a gift. And yet, do we want them to overcome us? Do we want them to run us ragged? And of course not. And so when they come up, there's incredible simple ways where you can just breathe into the feelings. So number one, if you don't breathe into them and you suppress them, then they become part of your energy field. And then they're in the unconscious, acting out all the time. So the important thing is, when something comes up, like you said, take a minute or two, breathe into it, and allow yourself to feel it fully, because feelings are just feelings, and they will pass. If we resist them or avoid them, then they become part of us. So we work with people to assist them in using the breath on a daily basis to integrate what we call the emotions. But we also work a different way in the process with accessing the repressed emotions that we've had since maybe birth, and going in there and connecting with them energetically and transforming the energetic state to a higher frequency. And the particular breathing pattern that we use has the ability to do that. So we're literally working at the energetic core of some of these emotions: terror, fear, anxiety, you name it, they're all in there, anger, rage. And it's how we've survived, by actually repressing them. But now we can reverse that and go in with conscious breathing, a certain pattern, and tap into it energetically and transform it at an energetic state. So this is life.
So powerful. Like, yeah, just the ability to tap into our breath and use it in a way where we can have maybe past trauma surface, and then we can process that trauma or those feelings or things that maybe we have suppressed our whole lives, going back to, like you said, maybe when we were children. And it's a tool that we have, right?
I'd like to just kind of interject here, because you say process them, and the way they get processed in our breath system is that the energy of the breath processes it during the session, that you don't have to come out and start thinking about the things that came up from your past. And I think this is an incredible, unique gift to be able to do that, to use the energy of this energy pattern we use to go in and change it at the energetic level, so that it's no longer inside of us vibrating and creating experience. And so it's not like you have to go home, think of things different, or talk to this person, or to resolve it, that it's getting resolved, permanently resolved internally through the application of the way we breathe. And this is what really, to me, is so profound in this work, having the ability to do that, because you can't really read about these patterns or say affirmations or visualizations, because they're in there at a certain energetic state. And unless you meet them at that same vibrational state, you're not going to be able to change them. And they're there and they're creating our experience. So we need to address it. We can't just say, well, they're in the unconscious, forget about it. And yet there's many, many things from birth on, because up until 6 or 7, we can't even process anything with our mind. So there's all these unresolved feelings that have come in our early childhood that are literally creating our reality and experience.
When you say we're able to, through the transformational breath, we can change the energetic frequency, would you say that's the same or similar as healing trauma?
Well, we call it, I would say, resolving or integrating it, because, and if you start saying healing, maybe you get into other realms where breath experts or breath therapists maybe shouldn't go, as far as, we'll heal this and we'll heal that. And yet when the integration means it's changed, it's now, let's say, existing inside of us at a different frequency, a higher frequency. So it is resolved. But I'm careful when I use healing, because I don't need the AMA to come, and say, what do you mean you're healing this or that, or the Board of Psychotherapy. And yet what we see is that these patterns are getting permanently resolved from working with them energetically with the, let's say, the frequency of the breath that's created in our process. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Absolutely. No, it absolutely does make sense. So what would you say is the difference between transformational breath and other conscious breathing techniques?
Well, we've kind of been a little bit of a renegade process in that, let's say, different things have come to me over the years to integrate into the breathing that have been very supportive. And beginning from my beginning roots, which it was as a doctor of metaphysics and a spiritual healer. So I was very much connected to the power of prayer and working spiritually with people. So that was the first layer that was there, making it a spiritual self-healing process. And then soon sound came into it, working with the frequency of sound during the process, especially when it got difficult to breathe. There will be times when the emotions or the physical sensations are too intense and it's too difficult to breathe. And so then we were guided to bring in pure, clear tones to support that integration. and it worked. And it's a beautiful kind of what you call escape valve, that when things are too much to breathe into, we can go and but move to working with sound. And sometimes people, their sounds will come out like a moan or a scream, and that's actually absolutely fine. And we will go ahead and lead them into that pure, clear tone, which will change the resonance of whatever's going on. So sound has become a good plan B in our work, and we work with it a lot. And then soon after that, we were getting guidance about working with the body. And initially it was finding acupressure points and working on them with the breath and activating certain cellular memories and issues in the body. And then that expanded to where we would hold the points. And then we started working with the muscles that are used during respiration. And then we started different holdings and pressures. And so we do a lot with the body during the process to support it in the breath opening up, to support it in the integration, and actually going deeper into the process and activating things that are, let's say, keeping the breath shut down or controlled.
I'd love to touch a little bit more on that aspect of sound. So when you say sound, you're talking about the people that are breathing, is the sound coming from them, correct? Like their expression during the breathing, whether that's a sigh, a moan, a scream.
Well,
would that be accurate?
Yes, people will, as you know, you've probably been around a lot of breathers, things will come up, whether it's a toning, it could be a primal scream, it could be a moaning. And what we try to do is reach a clear pitch with them. So we don't just say make some sound, because people aren't used to that. They won't know what it means. So we'll either say make these sounds with me, or they'll be making a sound and we'll try to bring that sound into a harmonious pitch. And so that's how we do that. And if a low sound comes out, we know there's things in the lower parts of the system, the lower chakra energy system. Or if it's we usually start with ah, which is the sound of the heart. And then if it goes higher, we know there's things in the higher aspects or energy centers if it's lower. So we match their pitch, but we try to make it a clear, just a clear high sound. And so it's amazing what happens when we do that. The energy will shift. If someone has, like we call tetany, a little involuntary tension in the body or little temporary paralysis, that sounding will open that up right away, and they will be free of that. So I find it's just been so helpful to have that when people get into a place of real intensity and they're not able to breathe.
Yeah, there's something special about being able to express a certain sound through breath work. You know, on that exhale typically is when I'm getting into certain sounds, whether it's just an exaggerated, exhale or sigh, or even like a little bit of a scream. Mm-hmm. There's something there on an energetic level that I wouldn't have without the intentional breathing practice, because a lot of people feel silly just like letting out a big sigh or letting out a scream or a moan, or even like humming on the exhale.
Yes.
I find to be really powerful. Is there anything you have on what's going on when we hum on the exhale?
Well, we don't necessarily work with that in session, but we will do exercises, sound exercises for the different centers. And a high-pitched hum is actually for the highest center. So I would think if you're doing that during the session, maybe you're connecting to your spiritual center there, because the sound vibrates at the highest center. And it's a good way. We work with the sound to keep people in the process, so it's not like taking a break and making some sounds. We bring the sound in and then get them right back into the breathing to keep the process going. So
got it.
That's how we're doing it.
Yeah, that's great. Since you've mentioned spirituality a few times, I'd love to touch on how our breathing can connect us to our spirituality. And I have experienced this myself. In terms of putting it into words, it's a little challenging for me because it was definitely, it's an experiential thing for me where I felt it, it was, it was tapping into certain emotions that maybe I've been holding on to, but then also it's like seeing certain things, visions, colors, lights, a feeling of a spiritual presence. So can you share a little bit more with us on how people can connect with their spirituality through conscious breathing?
Yes. Well, one of my favorite quotes was from a spiritual master saying that the breath is the key and the gateway to accessing the higher dimensions. And I have always felt that. And in our system, we have things built into it so that the spiritual things are not happening when they're meant to, let's just say when sporadically, that it's a consistent part of the process. And so we do something that we call invocations that align us with a higher intention, the person's higher self, the spiritual beings of light. And then we also create, let's say, invocations at the end where we invoke a person as they've done, let's say, the integration on the lower subconscious. Then there's an opening to the higher subconscious or spiritual aspect of someone. So we actually invoke that connection. And then I think the best part of all is at the end of the session where we actually turn the breathing session over to that person's higher self, to the spiritual guides and beings to complete the session. And that's when people have amazing mystical experiences, amazing connection with their own beautiful divine nature. And so it's very much built into our system. And then there's another part, might be a little much for this thing, but I'll share it with you. We are training our practitioners to embody something we call miracle consciousness, where they are able to hold a perception beyond human perception, spiritual perception of, let's say, an absolute reality of that individual, their client, themselves in life, where we go beyond human conditions and understand, let's say, higher truths and awareness in the process and in life. So we have a lot of spiritual goings on in our process, and it's probably the ultimate goal, and yet we have to access and accomplish the physical part, the mental and emotional, to really tap into that spiritual part the way we can.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. For me personally, I've grown up in, wouldn't necessarily say spiritual household, but definitely religious household. Very, very Catholic family. And that was very much a part of my upbringing. And I would say, over the years, it's not that I've strayed away from that, but I definitely have explored different parts of my spirituality, and breathwork has, especially intentional breathing, has been the biggest catalyst for some of that spiritual growth. And it's something I never expected when I got into all of this. I never really expected there to be a spiritual aspect to it. And once you start experiencing it, it's just so profound. And it almost makes you want to come back for more and explore more and discover more. And it's just absolutely fascinating. Like I said, mostly because I just didn't expect that going into it. And then you do experience that, and it's a beautiful thing.
It is. It's, to me, like the ultimate answer and reason why you would do it. It's great you have more energy and better health and balance, and that you can live in a more peaceful, joyful life. But the spiritual, and especially right now, is so essential, and to have a tool that can take you there relatively easily. It's a journey, but relatively easily, and to be just to be available, that we don't have to go out and buy it, that this is something we can choose to use in our own time frame, in our own environment. And it takes some support and guidance in the beginning because of the journey there, and you need support going through the big pieces in the subconscious and learning how to open your breath. But once you're there, it becomes a lifelong tool. And to me, the biggest benefit is that connection to the deeper self.
I love that. You've touched on quite a few things there that are so important. And you've mentioned the word gift a few times in this conversation, and that's exactly what it is. Yes, it's a tool. Yes, it's, something that's natural that we can tap into, like you said, in our own environment, on our own time, when we feel the calling, when we feel the need. But at the end of the day, it's a gift that, to your point, is something that if we want, we can have that for the rest of our lives. And what an awesome thing for people like you and I to be able to give that to other people. Even though it's a part of who they are, it's always been a part of who they are. They're just not necessarily aware of it.
Yeah. It's one of the underestimated, unexplored frontiers there is. And that's what's so exciting about, and even though I've been doing it a long time, there's still, most of the people on the planet have not discovered their breath. So I think there's a big insurgence of breath workers now. People, schools used to be a few schools, maybe 30 years ago. And now there's lots of different places where people can go and learn about breath, maybe the physical aspects. A lot of them are focused on the mental and emotional, and there are some that even include the spiritual. So breath is it. I think someone said the other day it's the new yoga. So that's exciting.
That's so true. Such a great point. I would love to hear more about that journey for yourself. I agree. I've heard that from other people that yoga, especially in Western culture, let's say 10, 15 years ago, really became popularized. And we're seeing that now with breathwork, at least in the West. Obviously, it's been around for so long, and you were really a pioneer in this, going back, 30 years at a time where it was maybe
45 years.
45 years.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
That's okay.
Yeah. Got to give the right credit where the credit's due.
30 years, it was a no-brainer, but
yeah. So at that time, it was, I'm sure you could speak to it better than I could about how it was really not societal norm, and you pioneered this. So tell me a little bit more about that journey of how this came to be for you, how it came to you, the idea of intentional breathing practice, and what was that journey like?
Well, it started out with little old me, and now we have literally thousands of practitioners and have programs in over 53 countries. And even with COVID, things are definitely restarting, and we have a very active online academy. But in the very beginning, it was the mid-70s, and I was living in Northern California, had a spiritual community and some land, and was at that time, like I said, practicing, working as a spiritual healer through the vehicle of prayer, and had an opportunity to experience some of the early breath work. Someone who had studied with Leonard came up and wanted my services and wanted to trade. So she did some breathing with me, and it was like, wow, this is amazing. And she said, you should incorporate this into your work. So I was already working a lot with inner guidance and, let's say, some of the teachers on the inner planes. And so just knew basically what to do, what to start to do. So I started doing it and sharing it with the clients I had already, and it was amazing. And as I would do it, there would be new guidance and new information about what was going on and what to do and how to do it. And it just kept evolving. But about 2 or 3 years into it, I inadvertently found that I had a cancerous growth in my throat. And at that time I had 2 small children, and this was in, the 70s. Alternative health wasn't really a thing then, believe it or not. And even though I was in California, and so it was kind of a risky thing. I was teaching people about alternative health, and that was my lifestyle. And yet now I had a choice to go the allopathic route or to more or less walk my talk, to practice what I knew and what I believed in. But I also felt I had a responsibility because I had these 2 small children. And yet when I prayed, the guidance was very clear that you need to follow what you believe in and move forward with the tools that you had. So the best tool I had, the strongest tool I had, was my breath. And so I began breathing every day and praying, of course, and guidance was coming through. I could feel waves of energy in my throat. I could feel emotions and words I had not expressed. And I also received guidance, a lot of guidance about how to change my life, how to speak my truth, to change my diet, and things like that. And so some of the guidance, some of the healing was getting the awareness and then following through in your life with making some changes. And so I'd say about 2.5 months into that, I was putting lotion on my body, and I got to my throat area, and the tumor was gone, the growth was gone. And I knew, actually, in that moment, I had gotten a miracle, that it was a miracle. And I also felt, even though I did a lot of other things, that it was the breath that took me to the core issues, moved the energy, and allowed me to make some deep inner changes. And in that moment of realizing it was a miracle, there was a part of me saying, I want to share this with the world. And this wasn't even clear what this was. And yet I knew that the breath was kind of the key element or aspect of that healing. And so life unfolded, and it just kept, I just kept working with people, and then people came to me, we want to learn how to do it. And then the trainings began, and, it just kept going and growing. And soon there were other people who could do it. After that, soon other people who could train other people. And, we have a beautiful global, I like to call it a family. It's a breath family, and yet it's a line of professionals that are doing programs consistent with what we do, true to the teaching, and with a unified teaching and program that we share. So you could go to any training anywhere in the world and have the same quality experience, which I have found is true.
Such a beautiful story. And what's so neat about it is how you discovered this in your journey. The concept of spirituality is very present. I would say that's probably, the most dominant aspect of this is that spirituality, that prayer. But with your specific story, there's also the physical aspect of it with, with the growth in your throat. And then you have, I'm sure, a host of emotions that play into that situation that you were dealing with. So even though on the outset, it seems like you're tapping into that spirituality aspect through your breath, you're also healing with, the physical side and the emotional side. And that's what's so neat. Like for me, when I got into breath work, it was more on that emotional side. I was realizing that I can really work through different emotions. And then you realize, oh, but it's also improving my physical health. And it's also improving my spiritual health. And it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
And that's what's so neat for me.
Yes. And we work very uniquely. You had asked some of the unique things about transformational breath, and we begin in a different place than other breath works that I know, and I'm pretty familiar with most of the big ones, all the big ones actually. And that, first of all, on the physical level, we look at the way someone breathes specifically, because everyone has a unique breathing pattern. And so we look at that unique breathing pattern, and the goal on the physical level is to create a completely open, flowing breath, because that's going to influence the other levels, the mental and emotional and the spiritual. So some people only breathe in the upper respiratory areas, and they use their chest muscles. Some people breathe in the middle, and they use their solar plexus, and some people are just belly breathers. And so we look at those patterns, and we train our professionals to understand what those breathing patterns mean, because they all have understanding and meaning. And we also train them, give them a lot of technique to open up the breath. And of course, the areas that are closed, they're closed for some good reasons. One of the reasons is that they are keeping certain emotions shut down and certain things suppressed in the unconscious. So when people start breathing in those closed areas, they start accessing old patterns, memories and feelings and different areas of expression that have been shut down. So we work with that. That's where we begin, and that part stays consistent throughout the process, so that we have a common denominator, bottom line, in this work as far as where people progress on the mental, emotional, and the spiritual. And so to me, that's an essential piece. To assume everybody's breathing the same and you're going to have consistent results if you don't address their breathing pattern, it's a lie. It's not true. You have to work on creating that open breath. You get people to that space, because things can be resuppressed if you don't. If you keep a certain area of the respiratory system closed, then the things that have been in the unconscious can just go be stored there. So it's very interesting, and it's a beautiful way because it addresses physical conditions as well. Because if someone's not breathing in the lower respiratory areas, they usually have lower body physical symptoms. They could have reproductive issues, low back, digestive. And then by learning to breathe down there, the physical symptoms get addressed as well, although we do not say cure. But there's more life force flowing there, and the system is functioning more perfectly.
That makes sense. Can you walk us through each of those areas of our breathing muscles? So when you say that somebody is maybe neglecting to breathe into their lower belly, their diaphragm, they're only breathing into their chest, or they're only breathing into their midsection, their solar. So like what's going on when we maybe neglect certain parts of our breathing muscles, whether that's physical, emotional, spiritual?
Well, there's only one set of muscles you need to use to breathe. There could be secondary ones, but the muscle we absolutely, or let's say the muscle system, is the diaphragm. And if someone's not using the diaphragm, then they are creating stress and tension and ineffective breathing. So that's our first job, is to get them to use the diaphragm. And about a third of the people in the world don't use their diaphragm. So you have people that are just not breathing effectively or very dysfunctionally. And so that's the first thing we do is get people to use their diaphragm. When you're using the diaphragm, the lower abdominal and stomach area rise as you inhale, because the diaphragm goes down into the lower areas of the body and causes expansion down there. The air doesn't go into the stomach, but it actually looks like the stomach and abdomen are rising and falling. So that has to happen. That's essential. And we don't go any further with anyone until that happens. And usually, because it's the way nature intended us to breathe, that usually happens. Once it happens, it stays in place. Like someone doesn't have to think about it forever. But then there have been people, like I said, about a third of the people who have tended to move away from that. And usually it's because they didn't really want to come into their bodies, that this pattern comes in birth, and they just didn't necessarily want to come all the way in. So they're not functioning in a grounded, focused way in their life. So by learning to breathe down there, that gets them more grounded. It gets them more in their power. It helps them focus, and definitely better for lower body physical health. And so that's a primary breathing pattern, and that's where we start. There can be secondary muscles in the chest and rib cage that kick in when you're using the diaphragm, and that's fine. But we certainly don't want to start the breath in our upper chest. We don't want to start it in the midsection. We want to go ahead and use that diaphragm fully, bringing it all the way down, almost to the pelvic floor.
Mm. And is that for just daily breathing? Like as we're breathing throughout the day, it's important to breathe into the belly to start?
Yeah. You want to use your diaphragm. That's the muscles we were given to breathe with. So yeah, so we carry it over, and we give people in our programs a lot of homework and a lot of awareness. Am I doing, when do I stop using my diaphragm? When do I go? Because that fight or flight, the fight or flight breath is the hyperventilation one, where people just go into the upper chest breathing and hyperventilate. And so, for everyday breathing, you want to use the diaphragm for the rest of your life, and it will take care of a myriad of things that are going on every level.
And is there a time where, obviously breathing into the diaphragm is very important. Is there a time where we would want to focus more on breathing into the chest? What's the benefit of that?
Well, as long as you're still using your diaphragm, otherwise stay away from your chest. Because it's just not, first of all, you'll be getting into the higher energy centers without the grounding of the lower centers. And people get off balance if you're just using the chest muscles. But we progress. We start with the diaphragm, and then we work with the breath, bringing it all the way up through the whole system, even through bringing it up through the throat. And then we switch over to breathing, nose breathing, which activates and works on the higher centers. So there are special sessions we do breathing in and out through the nose, but the diaphragm is still being used. Like you never want to put the diaphragm to rest, or at least I haven't found any reason to, because it is the muscle structure that works with the lungs. It's attached to the lungs. When you use it, the lungs expand and air comes in. When you exhale, it contracts and the air goes out. And that's really all people need to do to breathe. It can be that simple.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's so simple, but so profound. Mm-hmm. What else would we need to know? We've mentioned diaphragmatic breathing, nasal breathing. What are some other things that we would maybe need to remember in daily life about our breathing?
Okay. Well, I would say when things come up, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling tired, because 70% of our energy comes from the breath, our life force, our prana. So if you're tired, you can do a few minutes of this connected breathing and energize yourself. You can do some minutes when any feeling comes up, and not to get rid of the feeling, but to actually really feel it. So again, it doesn't become part of you. And I call it a mini like mini meditation. You can sit down for a few minutes, close your eyes with the intention of just connecting deeper to yourself, and just get centered for what's next. If you need to energize or be in your heart. In our programs, we teach people to breathe into the different centers to activate the expression of those centers. So we have some throat breaths, we have third eye breaths, we have higher chakra, 8th through the 12th breaths, and then we have, the different power breaths. So there's a lot of ways you could use this integrative breathing to create more opening and expression in our lives as well.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I mean, you've mentioned so many great things there. Just the fact that we can pause at a moment's notice, whether it's, a time where we feel anxious or feel, flustered or heightened by a certain emotion. Even if you're a little sleepy or drowsy and you want to bring more energy into your day, there are different breathing patterns to tap into that. And
yes.
So cool to me that we can really regulate the nervous system by simply breathing.
Yes.
And
we even discovered something, we call it a breath dance, where we bring our arms up and breathe in and bring them down and breathe out and move to music. And, you do that for a couple minutes, your breath gets going, you're energized. So we play with that in our programs just to show people like, hey, we can have fun with this too. It isn't just another work thing.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. What's the importance there of incorporating movement, either incorporating movement into our breathing practice or viewing the breath as a type of movement? Can you tell us a little bit more about breath as a movement?
Well, to me, the breath is the movement of the life force within our system. So wherever our breath is shut down, that's where we are blocking the life force. And so it's essential that our life force be able to move freely throughout our system. But interestingly enough, when it does, when our breath is open and flowing, we are actually literally in the flow of life, because the life force, life, is moving through us freely. And so that journey through the physical is really worthwhile, because we're freeing up our life force. We're freeing ourselves to be in the flow of life. And I don't think people realize that, but when people do our programs and we get them to that stage, they feel it. Life is better. They're just in the flow, they're in the zone, so to speak. So that's very special.
Yes, it really is. It really is something special that there's certain techniques, or I guess other things we can do to tap into that. But as far as I know, breathing is the best way to do it, to tap into that life source. And
like, what's gonna
right,
trump the life force? There's nothing more powerful than the life force, and that's what we're working with.
right.
And I like to say at the end of the sessions that your breath is the movement of spirit in your body, and to allow that, to bring that awareness in. And that's very powerful for people too.
So beautiful. So people that are listening right now that want to learn more about transformational breath, how can someone begin their experience of transformational breath?
Well, like I said, our programs are starting up again in many of the countries, even in the US, and there's in-person opportunities. And over the 2 years, we went with the flow, and we developed a beautiful online academy that has something like, if someone just wants to start, we have something called Breath Discovery Camp, where we just take them from day one into their diaphragm and keep progressing, 10-week course. And then our regular website is now listing a lot of workshops and weekends, and that transformational week, and even our trainings. And that would be www.transformationalbreath.com, transformationalbreath.com. And that's our website. And interestingly enough, I am just starting a 7-week program on the Shift Network around tying in breathing to living a more abundant life. And that's abundance on every level, and seeing how our breath is actually a key element in having a more abundant life, and tying some metaphysical principles and the journey of the breath with being more abundant.
And Judith, the question I'd like to end on is, what does it mean to you to live a good life?
Well, it ties right in with the program that I'm going to be offering. And it means I feel we're meant to be here fully abundant in every area. And that's on every level: physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and all the divisions of those levels. So it could just mean being healthy, being energized, being, on the physical, enjoying being in a body, and then different areas of our mental and emotional and spiritual lives, and just really living abundantly, and feeling that that's our birthright. That's why we're here, and to own that. So, and I've got a lot of those areas covered, and I'm very conscious of other ones. One is just a little more rec time. I could give myself a little more rec time. I love my work so much that sometimes I just get lost in it. So that's one area of abundance I'm looking at experiencing more. And when I just started playing tennis again, just for that purpose.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
those are the kind of things. Yeah. So just to
So important
be
to
good
work
to
on things that
ourselves.
we enjoy.
Yeah, be good to
Yeah.
ourselves, love ourselves, and just feel abundance on every level, that we have the ability, and we have we deserve it.
Beautiful. What a great note to end on. Judith, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today and sharing all of your expertise and all of your work. And I know you are so well respected in the breath community, rightly so, for 45 years of work. And I just appreciate you and all that you're doing.
Thank you, Dan. It's been really great hanging out with you, and thank you for, spreading the word for not only the breath work, but for all the other things that you do. So I appreciate you too. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. You have a great day.
Thank you. I'm glad we found each other.
Me too.